Thank you, everyone, for joining today's webinar session with Katalon. My name is Gokul. I head up the solution engineering team here at Katalon. My role specifically is to talk to customers day in and day out and understand their core problems and use cases and help solve some of the challenges that they face. With that, I think we wanted to talk about a specific topic that's of interest to a lot of our customers today, which is around Selenium and Katalon best practices. With me, I have Mush Honda, who's our Chief Quality Architect. Mush, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Gokul. Hello, everybody. My name is Mush. I've been with Katalon for a significant amount of years. My background is primarily all things quality engineering and development. I used to be a developer and then switched over to the dark side because, quite honestly, it's more fun to critique other people's code than have my own code critiqued, right? No, just kidding. But yeah, I'm happy to be here and talk about Selenium and all things Katalon. So looking forward to this discussion.
Awesome. Thank you, Mush. We'll get right into the agenda for today. First thing we'll cover is the state of test automation in the report that was created. We'll cover that at a high level. We'll walk through the automation framework journey with Katalon. We'll also talk about why move to Katalon, right? Like if you are a customer who has, a lot of effort put into Selenium, how is it that our customers are finding benefit in moving to Katalon, and how can we make that move easier? So those are the topics that we'll cover for today, and then we'll wrap it up with some Q&A. We'll take some questions on the chat. You can also submit your questions via Q&A as well. So either ways would work. With that, I'll let Mush talk about the state of test automation 2022 and 2023.
Awesome. Thank you, Gokul. So yeah, so this is actually a great time, quite honestly, right? To just step back, reflect, what each of us within our projects and within the industry in general have seen happening with testing and quality engineering, and also use that as a way of, sort of look into a little bit into the future. I know if you guys have been on top of news this past week, ChatGPT has been the talk of everyone, right? And everybody trying different things out, myself included. So it's definitely something that is going to be front and center, I think, for the next year. But just, if you think about what test automation, why test automation is going to continue to be a pretty integral and critical part of software that all organizations develop and deliver, right? If you think about it, the key areas that is going to continue feeding that growth is going to be that demand for increased coverage and really translation into high confidence for the release of all of the different products going out, right? And the key driver for that sort of confidence is the emphasis on continuous testing. And as we all know, coming from this space, right, is the need for automation to be a critical role in that continuity and usage of the word continuous as part of that confidence builder. Keeping that in mind also, right, keeping consistency with the need for that continuous testing is going to be the shift left approach, right? And that, for those of you familiar with automation, I'm sure you guys have heard about the usage of testing pyramid, right? And for those who are not as familiar, it's a good thing to just quickly Google and look and dive into, right? It's a good practice to actually apply that as a way of applying adequate coverage. So that's definitely something that is going to be heavily used in the coming years as well. And I think the other key part that we've observed, right, is that increased shift in the mindset of going from quality assurance or QA into engineering of testing, right? And hence the increased use of the acronym QE representing quality engineering, right? And personally, what I believe is using engineering in really the complex activities that we as testers do lets other people who may not be as aware of what our capabilities and our skills and specialties are, having them understand that this is a core part of engineering and software development. And ultimately, this shift is being caused for that need for efficiency and the ability to address any of the changing business values or user experiences that are driving the need for speed and that confidence in product releases. If you think about, where we are going as an industry in 2023 with these key drivers, and an important thing also to keep in mind is, what prevents us from achieving that state of nirvana, right? And what we've typically seen is most teams who have not achieved that state of nirvana or coming close to it, what they typically struggle with are three core components, right? The very first one is the dependency on technology, right? Test automation being a software project, right? If you do not know and have the technical skills, it can quickly become a very expensive initiative for organizations that are moving or want to adopt test automation as a critical part of their software development cycle. In addition to that, right, people who have adopted automation in whatever maturity state, we've quickly realized also that stability in that automation is always a challenge, right? Things such as script brittleness, script troubleshooting, decreasing confidence on knowing whether issues that have been identified by the scripts, are they true defects that have been observed, or are they caused by the ineffectiveness or maybe the limitation of the way the automation script was created, and hence the debugging is on the script and not so much as the system under test. And then, the other key inhibitor for achieving that nirvana state is always the ability to say, well, yeah, let's test this manually because we have these challenges that we have to overcome. Pretty much not enough time to actually automate or troubleshoot. So let's automate after we have pushed the release out. And I think for those who have tried this and have been in the industry for some time now will know that tomorrow really never comes, right? Because if you think about projects and automation as a secondary initiative, you are never going to prioritize that, and hence you will never come closer to that nirvana state. So as we get into next year, guys, just keep these things as items that people will continue to encounter, and hopefully as we talk through our presentation today, how you can overcome that. So looking at the next thing, right, our focus today is to sort of talk a little bit about Selenium, and this is geared towards people who are trying to adopt Selenium as part of their testing processes and workflows and software delivery, and then potentially either thinking about using Selenium as a base framework and using its libraries to build a solution for test automation, or looking at some of the other options that are out there in the market, right? So if you are fairly new to test automation, fairly new and doing some initial research about Selenium, that Selenium is basically a library that automates browsers, right? Like this is essentially, even if you go to Selenium's website, that's basically the power that library gives each of us as automation engineers, as quality engineers to go do, right? So if you step back and think about how testers and test architects actually use Selenium, right? In a nutshell, you have to use an IDE, right? And Selenium libraries need to be linked/imported to then have you create a framework that defines how you can use that ability to interact with browsers through the commands and keywords of Selenium, and then figure out what your tests and actions need to be, right? And for those who are not as familiar with the concept of frameworks, right, that's nothing more than thinking of code that is written in a reusable fashion that allows you to interact and validate certain behaviors and actions within the browser for the system under test, right? So if you think about, well, what are these two roles that we are talking about, right? Think about it in these broad categories, right? A test architect in a team is typically the role that helps create this framework slash reusable code for the interactions using Selenium libraries, right? And the testers typically are the ones that use this framework, right, to actually create the scripts, create the suites, set up the test data, and so forth using that framework. So they become the users of the framework, focusing on building the scripts. Now, of course, depending on the maturity and the size of the team, you may have people who perform both of those roles, meaning they are the ones who create the framework as architects, and then also as the engineers or testers who then use the framework to actually create the scripts. Okay.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Mush, for adding some clarity on Selenium as well as starting through the trends. We'll cover about Katalon a little bit, right? And why and how Katalon is, more in conjunction with Selenium, as well as what are the advantages that it can provide. So Mush talked about what a framework means, how a tester creates, consumes a framework, and an architect creates a framework. Katalon, on the other end, and we talk to a lot of customers on a day-to-day basis, right? So we see that the core challenge for our customers in the space is they've either moving from manual to automation, or they're on Selenium and moving into Katalon, and they have challenges with Selenium that they see that there's things around maintenance and making sure the drivers are up to date, the versions are up to date, right? So the integrations are up to date, making sure the libraries and all of that is up to date, right? So there's a bunch of challenges associated with Selenium that we see customers tell us. There's also advantages to it, right? So we take all of the advantages, couple that with the challenges that we have with the existing open source Selenium as it stands, and the level of effort it takes to build a new framework, put it into a product called Katalon, right? And essentially, Katalon is an existing framework that uses a lot of these Selenium libraries, along with integrations, along with the ability to perform API tests, mobile tests, desktop testing, being able to talk to different tools in a seamless fashion, and then providing you with the level of support and appreciation that an enterprise level customer would actually need, right? I think that's where we come in and differentiate ourselves. We walk through the entire life cycle of the test journey, all the way from plan to author to organize to execute and analyze. So being able to provide not just the ability to create those tests, but also to run it, as well as measure the impact from a testing standpoint. And one of the things that Mush covered was around coverage, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Mush, do you want to add anything?
No, absolutely. I think this is great what you gave as a summary. Right? I think as we get into the slides, Gokul, we'll sort of walk them through just the journey, I think, right? And perfect. You've got that set up. So let me dive into it just to give a context of to the team what you were sort of speaking in terms of the disadvantages and then the advantages, right? So, as a practitioner, right? I mean, I've been building frameworks in different capacities, quite honestly, over my tenure and career, right? And I've sort of used a lot of what I call as vanilla Selenium frameworks, right? Like building it from scratch using IDEs and stuff. And what I've tried to do here on this slide, right, is to summarize what is involved in setting up a Selenium-based automation framework, right? Now, keep in mind also, right, given the capabilities of the Selenium libraries, right, it's awesome where you can interact and behave, mimic a lot of user interactions through the browser for an application, right? But all of that, contrary to what we would ideally want, doesn't start from like within minutes, right? There's a whole effort involved in setting up that framework that allows you to do all of that interaction, right? And part of that is why initially I mentioned that one of the inhibitors is not treating software automation as a software project, right? And the reason why I keep bringing that up is because what that translates to is, in addition to our real responsibilities of building confidence in software being released as a tester, am I also now becoming responsible and sort of having to add to my skill set a lot of technical knowledge and abilities, right? And that is unfortunately an added expectation, right? It's very real that we have to do that. But the reason for that is if you try to build a Selenium, vanilla framework from scratch, you have to know a lot of those technical details, right? The very first one is first even identifying what is an environment that I need to build my framework into, right? What version of Java do I need to know and have installed on my machine? What other packages and modules do I need to have installed on my machine? What is the command line for that to be able to initiate all of the successful installation of it? What IDE must I use? How do I then associate and download the different libraries, including Selenium and the high-level language that I'm using? And again, I come from a Java background, so I use that as my example in my life cycle, right? But having to know that, what other unit test framework should I use to make sure that any of the assertions that I need to build are working as expected? What are the build environments and dependencies? Do I have Maven installed? Things like that, right, are, as you can see, just talking through it, there's a lot of technical jargon and tool sets that I'm already identifying to say, even before I begin doing any test automation, I need to know all of those, where to get them, what each of its protocols for those tool sets are. And then once I have all of that accounted for, downloaded, integrated, and linked to each other within my IDE or development environment, right? I now have to begin defining my framework. And the number one thing for that is knowing software engineering principles. I now have to define and design a framework that uses patterns like page object model, fluence, things like that, right? So page object model, for those of you who may not be as familiar, is typically the most popular design pattern that is used to build a robust vanilla Selenium framework, right? And even with that, it's basically, how do you organize your different components of a framework, right? Where do you put your actions? Where do you put your objects? Where do you define your helpers or utilities? And having all of that, if you have not done architecting of frameworks before, there is a pretty steep learning curve and hours either on Udemy that you're spending or Stack Overflow to try to troubleshoot all of that as you're building this, keeping in mind the pressure that you face in doing our day job, right? Which is basically making sure that the product that we are working with in a company, that is being released on time with the right feature sets, right? And again, going back to the inhibitors, that's what causes me as a tester to say, I will do this when I have more time. Let me focus on the most important thing, which is getting our company's product out the door. So I'm going back to manual testing, right? So having said all of that, you see, just building a framework from what we have seen in several iterations, right, at a minimum takes an average of 30 or 50 or more hours, right? And even the 30 to 50 hours, right, if you think about it, building a Selenium framework in under a week from scratch, if you're not reusing, code that you had from a previous employer to your new employer, etc., is pretty difficult and time consuming, right? And to do it right, to actually keep it scalable to meet the increasing technical complexities of the systems under test, that requires significant expertise and experience, right? And in a good robust environment and a good framework, I would say once you've got your framework set up, on average, it probably would have, at least a couple of hundred lines of code. More common is about 350, 400 lines of code, right? Just before, you even do a lot of pure scripting or test case creation. And Gokul's got that message there, right? It is definitely a lot of work in addition to our day jobs, right? And we haven't even begun testing. So just putting that in perspective, right? That was the real challenge we faced as testers, just getting or shifting or moving to adopting an automation framework with Selenium, right?
And I think
Not to
that's
say,
the reality, right? Most like,
yeah,
just having like larger organizations that we talk to, enterprise companies that we talk to, even smaller companies, they just spend a lot of time in creating and also improving these frameworks. And that's a lot of redundant effort, right? I think we'll talk through even more about how these test cases are created after building this framework. So, like I mentioned earlier, it's not about just building these frameworks. The testing has not begun yet, right?
yeah,
You have to create the base test case. You have to create a simple test scenario, test out your page, verify. You have to use verification, validation logics, for all of which you have to write code, and then identifying elements, putting code on that. Like, so there's just a lot of code, even purely from a creating test perspective, beyond just creating the framework, right? So,
absolutely, absolutely. And I'm just glancing over the chat, right? Afan actually says, hey, for someone who likes to have prior knowledge, right, before using anything, right, uh, and may struggle with new concepts, right, it actually would cause you to get stuck, right? And that's the unfortunate part, right? Because what has happened is, if you think about pure Selenium frameworks, right, when you Google for how to build a Selenium framework, you are probably going to get a lot of hits that have a lot of technical feedback and guidance without any prerequisite, right? So for example, right, if you think about building a framework in Java, right, the assumption may be, well, I need to understand Java to a pretty significant detail or depth before I can do anything, right? And it's difficult. We have to go learn that, versus saying, hey, is there a tool that's available that actually lets me scale my learning and my maturity and my skill set along with doing my day job, right? And that's absolutely right, where unfortunately, if you go to a custom framework, you're not going to be able to do that. You'll have to build and go learn more technology before you can even be effective at using those frameworks, right? And typically that's the problem. I see Cecilia also jumping in to say, yeah, it's important to exploit and fully leverage a tool to know what it can do, right? And research is typically the best thing. You typically rely on other people's experiences and their mistakes for this, but it comes back to that element of effort that we are definitely facing.
great. Yeah, I completely agreed, Mush. So I think, um, you know, to Afan's point, you got to have the experience, got to learn programming languages.
Yeah.
You need to have, some level of dev capacity within your testing organization in order to do a lot of small, simple things.
Yeah.
And I think that is the real challenge that we see with a lot of our customers is, why does it have to take so much time to build something that's really simple? So, and then there are other types of customers who have already scaled, right? So they've already written hundreds and thousands of test scenarios, but they face challenges too, right? And I'll let Mush explain a little bit more on the challenges that they face, right? But being able to maintain the effort that's already been built is a real pain point. Reports are a pain. Seeing analytics is a pain. Integrating with third-party tools is a continuous evolved approach. Having to play with objects, and if there's a new version of your application that's released, that's a whole new set of development effort when it comes to using an open source framework like Selenium. Mush, if you want to add something else, feel free.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I use this quite honestly, Gokul, as a way of highlighting to the people who don't understand what testers do every day to emphasize how critical and how complicated our role is in a team, to be honest, right? Because, to me, this is what you have up here is sort of like the secondary round of complicated challenges we have to face and resolve in our careers. Because even if you overcome the first hurdle of the technology knowledge and building up of that base skill, right? And if you've got a framework prepared, you continue to face the challenges of maintenance, right? Because like everybody knows, our products keep evolving, right? So the system under test is going to have new technology. You want to have better coverage. You want to, perhaps extend into APIs. You want to use mobile. New libraries are always coming up. As we know, Selenium is adding new capabilities, new features, being able to get into DOM objects, things like that, right? And that requires maintenance on an ongoing basis, right? And reporting is another interesting thing for sure, right? Like with a framework, you always want to have a third-party plugin, right? Extend, allow reporting, whatever you may use, right? That's something that you have to keep doing, and then having to customize that for meeting your specific release risk assessments, or giving data specifically to your team and your management to say what makes demonstrates that we are confident and the release is good to go, right, with minimum issues anticipated. Yeah. So that's always going to be a thing, and that's definitely again distracting us from the real work of honestly testing the software that we have to release.
Exactly, right. I think instead of becoming testers, we tend to become dev teams and building new capabilities for helping enable testing better, right? So it's just a lot of effort. The report part is a really important part. I know, like a lot of customers come and tell me, they don't have a centralized way of reporting and seeing the effort of how many test cases are passed or how many test cases have failed. Not very simple metrics like that, but how many of those are flaky, right? How are different teams doing? Just being able to have team level productivity metrics, being able to see what is the level of testing that's happening within the organization, that's typically is a very limited visibility from what I see with customers. So with that, I think there's a lot of pains, there's a lot of deadlines, and you have to get things done fast, right? And especially in this world, we just have to get our products out fast before our competitors do, and that is really important. With that, I'll let Mush talk about a little bit more on Katalon. I think we've talked about it a little in the earlier slides.
Yep. So keeping those pain points in perspective, right? That's why we came up as a solution for resolving that, right? And again, this is, from my perspective, quite honestly, Katalon as a platform is specifically built with us as testing practitioners in mind, to be honest, right? It's not anything that I feel that is more for lack of a better word, fluff to be able to impress people, but it's more about, hey, what can I do with it, right? So really, it's a platform, because what we've tried to do is take away the headache of that tool management while still giving us as practitioners and as teams the ability to mature with our growing skill set and our changing needs and demands of test coverage that goes with every team that is working on a product that has an aggressive release schedule, right? And what we've sort of tried to do is give you all of the benefits that Selenium as a capable library has, without having you to worry about all of that sort of overhead and headache of learning the technical information and knowledge as a prerequisite. So our approach was, hey, let's get some solution in play that allows you to, not have to know all of the technical nuances of building a framework from scratch, provide you with all of that effective plumbing, right? Having a good design pattern already defined, having a structure already in place, giving you all of that benefits, giving that to you, so that way you can start applying the benefits of automation within minutes versus hours, right, or weeks, and mature with it, where you can look under the hood, right, and be able to say, okay, now I understand. Let me actually first look at how is the script created as I am using a capability of this tool to create my tests. How does it identify the object? And it sort of lets you and gives you all of that access to whatever you need to see under the hood, and let you mature with it as your team matures in leveraging Selenium, right? And I think that is the key aspect, right? So to me, the key differentiator there is that speed factor, right? That scalability, as I was talking about, right? The visibility, right? Like I said, looking under the hood, being able to access and understand everything that is going on without hiding anything from you, right? It lets your team mature in your journey of test automation within your project. And then our goal also is, right, like by continuously focusing, coming from a practitioner, coming from a tester's mindset, right? What are some of the other things as our industry evolves and uses new technology, right? Like I was mentioning earlier, right? Like ChatGPT's AI, right? We are very focused and aware of that. And I think, quite honestly, as excited as I'm sure everybody else is to say, hey, how can all of this new AI and new technology help me perform more effectively, efficiently, and remove that mundane, repeated task that I have to keep doing, which basically bore me out, and remove the value I can actually provide with the domain knowledge that I have of that product, right? Of the system under test. What can new technology let me quickly use and help me focus on that new value and new benefit of this technology versus having me to figure all of that out. So that innovation aspect, for sure, I think is part of our sort of core principle as well.
Yeah, I think there's a question from Russ. Mosh.
Oh, yeah, let me clarify. So under the hood, meaning under the hood of just Katalon, right? So if you haven't downloaded Katalon or played with it, you'll see what it does is it pre-installs an IDE for you. It's got pre-installed Java versions for you. It goes and fetches all of the Selenium libraries and everything, right? So when you launch Katalon as a product, you will see it as a test automation framework that's already built, right? But it's not compared to some of the other commercial tools that are available where you can't see what's happening under the hood. You can still see, if you are to go and we have a way of recording test cases, almost like a record and playback for very beginning and initial users, right? When you create those tests, you can easily get into a view where you actually see the whole script, the different objects, all of that available to you, right? So that's what I meant when I said looking under the hood of the automation scripts.
Great. So I think just purely from a Katalon perspective, why customers choose us, right? I think that's what we want to talk about. The ability to do easy adoption. You can go and try Katalon yourself, download a free trial, get it up and running pretty quick. It's open and extensible, meaning we have a lot of integrations across the testing lifecycle and the journey. The ability to be powerful as an end-to-end solution, provide that overall framework that you desire with all the frequent updates that you would need is something that we provide. Purely from a support perspective, we have a massive global support community from a forum standpoint, as well as an internal support to help our customers. Beyond that, there are a lot of customers who are already using it and empowering their teams to accelerate the delivery faster. So those are kind of the values that our customers see from the overall Katalon platform. And purely from how we do it better, there's multiple points, but I would purely talk about scalability, right? One of the core challenges that we talked about in today's call was the ability to be scalable and not having been stuck with creating and editing code and being the development team again and again. That is one of the core things. And then purely from an innovation standpoint, being able to launch some of the AI capabilities, some of the newer aspects from a testing standpoint is something that we can provide. And we can walk through in detail as well at some point. So why make the move, right? And I think Mush can kind of attest to some of these questions and challenges that you may be facing. You may have gaps in test coverage. You may have frequently changing applications. There's a level of deep experience that is required for Selenium. It's just really difficult to onboard and test. Get testers. 6 months of coding training before they can start even pushing a line of code and having to test a specific feature. Those are all things that we see from our customers. And then ability to expand beyond web testing, right? So being able to do multiple facets of testing, including API, mobile, and desktop testing to an extent is all something that we see. And then last but not the least, being able to see the overall analytics and being able to get data aligned together is one of the core challenges that we see from our customers. So if you feel like you're facing any of these challenges, we are happy to chat with you, go through your specific scenario, in terms of your organization, what is the level of maturity, where you're trying to get to, and then provide the right solution for you guys. With that, how does Katalon make it more easy, right? There's the technical aspects as well as the business aspects. I'll let Mush cover this slide a little bit more. Overall, we do have a migration toolkit within Katalon, which helps you migrate from Selenium into a commercial solution like Katalon. But purely from a business and technical standpoint, Mush, if you want to elaborate a little bit on this, that'll be really helpful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think this particular slide is geared towards perhaps members in the audience who are currently using a automation framework, right? And in that aspect, that's where, as a tool, as a solution, we have a migration tool, right, that lets you move from your current vanilla framework, Selenium framework, to Katalon, if that is enticing, right? But the key aspect here, really, right, on the left hand side, the business aspects, right? The way we've sort of tried to put that is as a general guide, right, is for any of those members who are trying to make test automation as a critical and integral part of your software delivery process, right? That's the questions you should ask within your team and then define those as being the goals, right? And I'll hit on a few of these as an example, right? So the very first one is test automation, meaning every story in a sprint, right, when it is considered done and ready for deployment, it should be part of being validated or verified with automation scripts, right? So typically a mistake most people do also is say, hey, we will add test automation to our process once the feature is quote unquote stable, right? And really what we should be doing as part of the shift left mindset or an automation first mindset is to say, well, test automation should be part of our definition of done, right? The other aspect of it is how often and understanding how often automated tests are executed, right? Is it something that is part of your CI/CD process or out of your deployment processes in terms of going to different environments, etc.? And then how are you quantifying your confidence in the test coverage you have and the quality of the product, right? So looking at those components, definitely bring those questions up as part of how automation and testers add value to the business, right? So keeping that in mind, right? On the technical side, it's more about, hey, look at, as you adopt test automation or switch between tools, right? Look for things such as, hey, what type of tests are currently automated? What would be an ideal situation, right? Like one of the biggest things I always face, right, is Selenium lets you do a lot of the UI based automation, right? But if you think about the testing pyramid, right, you do want to have the ability to do more API tests, more non-UI centric tests, because those typically enable you to execute faster because you're not waiting on objects to be rendered, etc. You can probably go into the middle tier and do a lot more testing in terms of data exchanges between different systems, etc. Right? So when we get pushed with saying, hey, how are you able to increase more coverage and do it with speed, right? You want to be able to include in your overall test strategy things that you could test without the UI, right? And Selenium will limit that aspect, right? Currently. So being able to have a tool that lets you do all of that as well, right? That's another benefit or a reason why we have the ability to do API testing within Katalon as well. So those sorts of things are things to keep in mind as you decide on either transitioning out of an existing tool or picking a tool of choice for an automation initiative.
Great. Thank you, Mosh. Just moving on, I just wanted to highlight a couple of customers who have spent moving their tests into Katalon from Selenium. So first one is system automation. They reduced about 120 hours saved per month. That's a 96% reduction. They were able to do their testing in 5 to 6 hours from 2 to 3 weeks. They were able to scale and adopt for wider number of testers. That was the key results that they saw from using Katalon. The other one is also saved hundreds of hours of tests in testing, in creating tests and maintaining tests. And then they also saw improved code quality and delivery speed. With that, there's also if you need, ultimately, if you need help in doing the migration for you, once you get into Katalon, we have partners who can help for that as well. Quality Kiosk is one of the partners that we work with, and they have a lot of the top logos that they have worked with from a financial industry and insurance perspective and healthcare. So they will be able to help you with migration and put you towards that too. With that, I'm happy to say, we are excited for people who are interested to schedule a workshop and go through your specific scenario. Everybody has specific scenarios. There's no general rule of thumb of how the migrations should happen. But we are happy to chat with you and talk through what it could look like for your specific scenario. Once again, thank you for joining and taking the time to talk with us. I'll have some closing comments from Mush, and we'll close the call.
Yep, absolutely. I think guys, the number one thing I would say, right, is definitely keep learning, keep applying the technology. I think it's an exciting time, quite honestly, to be in the testing space and be a test engineer, right? I will also close by saying that we've got a great active community, right? And we've got a lot of tutorials and videos of the how-tos and things of that nature to be able to do, including, some of the questions that came out is with legacy apps like desktop testing and things of that nature. It definitely has all of that. We've got a lot of information around API testing, mobile testing, things of that nature, right? So you'll see a lot of that coming out. I also see a quick answer to one question. It says, hey, is it open source or a paid tool? It's not open source, but it's a free tool. There is a free version, and there's also an enterprise and commercial version on it. So you've got, depending on your specific needs, the ability to pick either and move from one to the other, right? It's truly a platform. So I would definitely encourage you guys to go visit our website and look at some of the community videos and short 2-minute videos and tutorials that we have in place, just for you to get that context, especially if you are learning and are familiar with Selenium.
Thank you so much for spending the time. Everyone, appreciate it. Mush, does the Katalon support editing part of a recorded script by doing a new recording?
Yes, it does. I see Rahul just posted that. So I say, yes, that is easy. I think we've got a video or two about showing how that is done as well. So yeah. Definitely check that out.
We deal with a lot of customers who have frequent changes in their applications. And so re-recording and updating only the new changes is something that we can do.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, Rahul. I think, think of recording as that initial stage, right? Like our hope is the way we've actually structured the platform really is once you have a script recorded, you can look at the steps of the script, and our hope is you can get comfortable fairly quickly to saying, I don't need to change the entire script or re-record the script. Here's the quick changes I can make very simply. And there's different ways of doing that where, as a tester, not only is this tool helping you do the testing that you need to do to meet your deadlines, but it's also almost helping us learn those ways and tips and tricks of how to get better technically as well. So it's actually, I look at it as a maturing tool as well, where it helps me get better learning the technology while applying it hands-on. So.
Yeah, once again, thank you everyone for joining and taking the time today. We really appreciate it. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me directly. First name dot last name, gokul.sridharan. I'll put it here at katalon.com. I'm happy to answer your questions. And mush.honda, katalon.com. Feel free to reach out to us and we are happy to help. I think automating Power BI dashboards, we can definitely look at that, and that's a definite use case for sure. Thank you all for joining again, and appreciate it.